riff off that, and I agree with everything Ian said. I mean, I think that part of, how you do the behaviour change stuff better is you recognise the fallibilities. You recognise that, there are certain things about human behaviour that are unlikely to change through will to power or through delivering kind of morality with a bow. And so what you do is you build around that, right? So you do things like you change defaults. So that's really simple, and you do, if the default is the better option for you, or if the default is the better option for society, then people are lazy, and that's likely to result in a significant change. And so you sort of design, and we do this in our own campaigns, in our own all the work that we do, creating kind of social engagement campaigns. We design for that, and you get much better action rates and participation rates when you do that. So as long as it's used for good and not evil. But to your point about money being the economic engine, I mean that is the fundamental structural issue that we have to grapple with when we think about brand behaviour, which is at the end of the day, profit maximising in the context of shareholders and public companies it means that it's quite difficult to get companies to make huge structural shifts unless they're in the financial interest of the shareholders of that company. And so you either look at alternative economic models, you look at things like B Corps and how those kinds of things might scale, or you look for the things that actually are this great alignment of economic interest and social good. Because otherwise you do run into that structural issue with a lot of the work that you do.
And I wouldn't characterise it as cynicism, but I would say your devil's advocate position is absolutely valid, not just on the brand side, do we trust brand behaviour, but do any of us really believe if we make a choice, a personal choice to make a difference, that it's actually going to make a net result on a large scale so that will make it worthwhile? And one of the great things competing against that is, sadly, right here in the US, so many people are struggling to survive. It's that much harder to be generous of spirit when you're struggling to pay your gas bill yourself. Even after you might have contributed to one sort of environmental disaster or another, it gets very, very tough. The only thing I would say is that the way that a brand can counter that and the way that a consumer can sort of have greater trust in the process is transparency. And I had the good fortune to be in at Charity Water this morning, and one of the great things they do is, firstly, they address it in two ways. They give 100% of the donations actually to the cause on the ground, and then they fund the operation itself separately. And then secondly, they follow up by showing you where that difference was made on the ground. So we as consumers are necessarily and understandably cynical both about brand behaviour, but whether our desire will make any difference. But if we're encouraged by transparency and accountability and certainty that our hard-won dollars are actually going to go somewhere useful rather than just get lost in the system, then I think we can get greater confidence. But again, it's a personal choice for all of us whether we want to take some responsibility for that change and put our hand in our heart and sort of go for it and work with those brands that do provide that transparency. And we have to consider the alternative too, which is if we don't and we just take our hands off the wheel and we either rely on government or philanthropy or brands to do it, there's a lot less certainty of the result that we all want.
Don't you think also that people are fearful of taking responsibility? Like it's sort of the sheep mentality. If their friends are doing it, then they'll do it. So it's sort of, and you might find this corralling the sheep to get people to be active.
I mean, I think there's lots of positive dynamics that you can create as well. So we see this all the time, right? So you show people that other people are taking action, they're more likely to do it, they like to feel like they're part of something bigger. So you get all of these virtuous cycles when you're doing this work where the kind of virality of something grows and feeds upon itself, or, and I think this is also true, where you get a kind of race to the top effect rather than a race to the bottom, where, you get companies that are competing to actually, move up the chain, in terms of social impact. The one thing I would say about how to kind of pass between these different initiatives is I would ask the question, is the intervention that either a company's making or anyone's making actually set up to either scale or to be easily replicated? Because I think if it's not one of those two, it's probably a distraction. And so, in other words, if you're doing something very nice, but that's really not going to solve a big problem, then you're probably actually not that useful. So you've got to build things to scale. a friend of mine just started a micro insurance fund. He raised $140 million to start a fund to start to scale the provision of micro insurance, which is like the insurance that we all have in the developing world, so that people can have a little bit of risk taken out of their lives, and they can actually then make better economic decisions, take some gambles with their lives that will create more prosperity. That's something that's set up to scale. His first fund's going to reach 25 million, and if he does that well, he'll raise a second fund that might reach 300 or 400 million. But initiatives that are cute but that are going to reach 20 people or even 20,000 people when you're taking on big problems like poverty, I think they're only valuable. We should only really applaud them if they're then more of a demonstration effect. If there's something about them that could be taken and replicated, if you take that model and then other people can self-organize to do the same thing, and that's how it scales. And so I think that's an important way that we can pass when brands are doing these kinds of initiatives. Is it trivial, or is it actually part of a serious attempt to solve a problem?
I completely agree, and I think the non-profit world is not exempt from the same expectations we put on ourselves as well.
Absolutely.
The non-profit world faces a lot of challenges. They are always or often competing for mind share, competing for funding share. They don't necessarily default to an open source mentality. So in Haiti, you'd see people trying to fix the same problem over and over again instead of actually working together. So one of my hopes by bringing the best of the private sector to the social change space is to hold non-profits to the same standard that the for-profit world does, which is what's the most efficient way to do this? And how are we measuring our impact on the ground? And how are we accountable in terms of how we're going about our business? So there's improvement needed on